Welcome back, everyone, for part two, Pillars of AI, with our guest, Richard Seroter at Google Cloud. You just mentioned something about SharePoint. You would be surprised how many people go to what extent to track something that is meaningless. So it's like, hey, because I can measure it, I'm going to track it. It's like, okay, so what exactly you're accomplishing by tracking that?
That's funny.
So you're not changing any business outcomes, it's just cute data to put it in the presentations and show it to people.
Yeah, the vanity metrics are tempting, but you really got to avoid vanity metrics at all cost.
Right. And Richard, like from AI perspective, I think what you describe, it's majority of it falls not so much different from what people were tracking when they were building platforms before AI, and they were putting things together, tracking all those basic things. Are there anything like really distinct to say, well, if you deliver AI platform, here is like really cool thing you can track, where it's actually tells you something that you haven't seen it before? Because I know you already mentioned it as like productivity improvement. That's pretty much basic thing that everyone is looking for. Anything that they build, obviously, there is a reason somebody is building to make things better, not worse.
Right.
So uptime and everything else. But I think AI has some distinct capabilities that potentially, let's say, if I build AI, maybe I want to discover something that I've never seen before. So if its model is doing whatever it's supposed to do, or scientists providing the data that they're looking for, and all of a sudden, like, we work for the same company before, they were doing a lot of discoveries, and some of those developments essentially turn out to be nothing, but they spent 10 years trying to develop, and then at the end say, well, it's not going to work. So would it be something that when somebody builds platform, they can essentially look for something that kind of unexpected thing that the AI platform can deliver that they haven't accounted for, and somehow is there a way to find those out?
Yeah. I mean, there's certain things you're going to look for that you didn't even look for before. One of our technical fellows here, she had mentioned a while back, one of the worst things you can do as an architect in the AI era is just take your architecture diagram and then just drop in a box that says, can't do that. Like, it does change how you think of your architecture, how you think of your platforms, things like that. So, for example, even look at things like network traffic. Your network traffic is going to be different. There's going to be a certain amount of chattiness. There's going to be certain caching. There's going to be other things you have to factor in, because now you're dealing in a very low latency environment. You're going to start tracking inference time. Nobody's going to sit here and wait for a model that takes 30 seconds to respond. So that's going to be the next race, right? The models are all good. They're going to keep getting better. But really, what's my inference time? How fast is it getting back the first response and then the stream response? Whatever. You probably weren't tracking that the same way before. So you're going to be tracking model response times. You're going to be tracking, you touched on a little bit, even some of the evals and how's the model improving, or I might even be doing A/B testing and giving these customers this model or this and comparing the quality of the responses going back. I might be looking at a number of things on just, again, even for AI applications. How are they performing? Are they flat on their usage, or are there certain spikes on when people are doing the most intense operations, because they're not all the same? So many of these are still going to look similar to some of the things you might have cared about in general, but you're not going to just do the old way with the new AI platform. You are going to look at network traffic differently, security and authorization and access. Look, I don't want an LLM giving data to people who shouldn't see it. So how am I also having a proper audit trail and keeping track of what's going on there? Or if I'm using an AI coding assistant, am I using any code that's not indemnified that I can get sued because it generated this code? Do I have any audit trail there? Do I have any protection there? Again, maybe you care about those things in other cases too, but you have to pay special attention in an AI platform on things like performance and authorization and security and those sorts of things. So, and then as teams get even better, what's going to be exciting is we've talked mostly about AI apps, but I don't know if you can transform your apps till you transform your ops, right? There's no way companies can be shipping 20, 30, 40% more code, all these new applications to platforms and operate it the same way. It's impossible. How am I going to keep it patched? How can I troubleshoot? Maybe when I haven't even seen the code before, because AI generated the code for me and I don't even know anybody who's seen it before. So you got to think about, what are our tools for observability and logging and tracing? How do I get a system back online using maybe AI tools, or do threat analysis? I'm sure a lot of your world is now you're going to have all these new attack vendors, right? All these new vulnerabilities are at least available in AI, with whether that's prompt hijacking, whether that is doing things in the back end and front end of models. So, okay, how am I protecting myself, doing threat analysis? How am I doing auditing? Again, it's exciting because I think this AI is going to make this stuff so much easier to sift through gigabytes of logs and immediately find a trend and figure out which IP address is trying to penetrate the system. Like amazing things that would have been impossible to do before is awesome. But you got to look at all of that. Don't just look at AI as let me help developers code faster or do stuff in my Google Docs and Sheets. Think about how do I work differently? How do I plan differently? I mean, just recently we announced our updates to Gemini and Gemini 2, like Gemini Deep Research. Look, right now I can go to Gemini if I have an advanced subscription and say something like, I'm trying to plan a trip to Orlando this winter. I've got young kids, come up with a plan. It immediately goes off, looks at like 50 resources, shows you all of them, comes up with a full plan. We're going to change how we do research. We're going to change how we troubleshoot systems. We're going to change how we plan software or even offer products. To me, all that's really exciting. So don't look at AI as dropping an LLM box into your architecture. Look at it as possibly a new way of working for the next 10, 20 years.
No, it's definitely fascinating, and I've already tried all those features that you describe. And one thing that I haven't really, again, I'm still waiting what you described and in security space to analyze logs and find those needles, because there's been so much different, there are so many different vendors going into that space, and everyone tells exactly the same story. I'm going to help you to reduce false positives, and you're going to have a single incidents to focus on, and I'm still dealing with exactly the same number of false positives. And analysts, they have to go through tons and tons of information to weed it out and find this needle in a haystack. So it got better, but it's not to the point where it's like, okay, here's a bunch of things, all those bad things, you can throw them out, and here's the good things and focus on them, and you get to resolution and incidents. So one thing that I was thinking, like when we talk about AI and building all those platforms and models and doing all those KPIs and all those indicators and everything that we can possibly extract, would it be fair to say, would it be possible to ask the same model to say, generate me whatever best metrics you can come up with? Would it be too far-fetched, or is potentially, again, let's say you build model or you build platform for doing scientific research, and then ask the question, then can AI come up with something, how we tracking or how we doing on this scientific progress and finding new drugs or finding new problems in cybersecurity, and build some interesting metrics around that maybe you and I didn't think about, or some other people didn't think about.
Yeah. So how good is it at actually helping me come up with the questions too, not just the answers? That's actually one of the areas I've been spending more time looking at, because I think you're seeing, we all think of these as great systems for giving me answers. I think you touched on it there. I think there's a lot of excitement in this helping me come up with better questions. So I think that in a couple of cases. First off, you're seeing more, at least in cloud platforms and on other products, where AI recommendations are being used to then push things to you as ideas. Like, hey, this account is over provisioned. You're not using those permissions. We've watched for 30 days. Go do something else. Okay, that's cool. Hey, you could optimize this cluster. It's using way too much capacity. You should downsize. Okay, thank you. So some push-based things that I wouldn't even have thought of doing, but it told me. But then go to the LLMs today. Go to Gemini. Go to these others. I've tried this. It's fun. Is I can come in and give it a list of bugs and features from my backlog, and I can say, hey, I'm a software engineering manager. What should I be even asking my team about these items to understand their priority? And I get back a really good description of, okay, you're telling me, this component crashes. Here's 5 questions to ask about. When does it crash? What is the impact? I mean, just really good stuff. So first off, just helping me ask good questions. We also shipped my favorite feature in Google Cloud this year. I'm not supposed to have favorites, but it's a feature of BigQuery, our serverless data warehouse, and more. But it's called Data Insights. And what it does is it takes a data set. It could be any data set, whatever, something you'd have in your data warehouse. And then you just say, hey, generate the questions for it. And what it does is it uses AI, looks at data statistics, look at the schema, and it comes up with like 2 or 3 dozen questions you should ask of that data set. It's such a good idea. Like maybe sometimes you just have a pile of data and don't know what to do with it. Maybe AI can help me there. And then, as you said, maybe we'll even get to a point where it can help me run synthetic clinical trials, or even help me understand what to ask of a certain situation. Google's been doing things even mapping all the molecules in the known universe. So there's a lot of things that this is going to make possible. As you say, not all of it's ready today. There's things that still feel like incremental improvements. But I think one of those use cases, hopefully your listeners and other folks do, is look at AI not as just an answer machine, but as a good question machine.
All right. Yep, that was my question, and definitely you hit the nail on the head, because yes, we can use it as sort of like a lot of people have understanding that AI is just a better implementation of Google search. They
Right.
go ask the questions and they get the answer, and that's about it. But I think what you said is absolutely true, because AI can also assist to generate better questions and actually spark conversation in a totally different direction than somebody is trying to get the answer from. So,
Absolutely.
big question is, how do you keep AI platform alive? Because I think that sort of goes back to development days when applications were built, and before they see the daylight, they already decommissioned because nobody really needs them, and they kind of chucked to the side. And the same thing happens right now with other platforms that we experience, and organizations go through the changes for a reason. They buy new things because upgrades and everything else that's already purchased doesn't always cut it, and they don't deliver objectives anymore, and then don't provide what is necessary when companies try that they acquired. But AI is like pretty significant investment of time and I would say money that organizations will undertake. So they have to feed, care, and keep it alive, and to make sure it still delivers on objectives. And I think the way I understand it, AI, it's expensive thing. So it's not like expensive money wise, but it can continuously expand. It can expand its knowledge, it can grow. So, and the key is to make sure that whoever brought it in and they delivered an objective, they actually understand that they can expand in different directions the platform that they built. So, how would you recommend people
Yeah.
go about it?
Yeah, we talked about some of it today. I think it's, I'll go back again to you've got to treat it like a product that has a lifespan. And a lifespan can also mean decommission. But this is not maybe the classic days where you and I have done waterfall things where you ship it, and then if it's funded, you do something to it later. I don't think platforms are ever done, they're just shipped. And so, how do you constantly think about the care and feeding, go through backlogs, interviewing stakeholders? Frankly, they should be constantly growing, not even functionally, but on users, right? Like a healthy platform continues to onboard new users, solve new use cases. It's useful, it's valuable. And so I think the best way to keep these things alive is A, to keep them fresh, but to keep them owned. Security updates, sure, but we talking to new stakeholders and they're telling us, oh, we could really use this new capability. Or what, the data shows that capability I added 2 months ago, no one has used it once. How about we retire that? And so without almost dedicated ownership of that and people thinking product wise, I don't think these platforms get beyond their initial interest stage. I think, or they just calcify and they just sit there and you're using old stuff and then we all move on to something new because that thing's not cool anymore. It's got to keep a heartbeat.
Got it, got it. Okay, thank you. So now I have the coolest question of the day or today's show. It's near and dear to my heart, so to speak. How do you keep things secure in AI? So it's you already touched upon something. There is data contamination, so there is also prompt contamination, and now I've seen threat actors sort of got the whiff of AI. It's like, man, it's a pretty cool thing. I'm going to be generating malware every second of the day now. It helps me to build new code. And now we've seen like scale that we haven't seen before. It's almost like every 20 seconds new variant comes out. And but my question is like, organizations jump on it, they bring it in. How would somebody secure to make sure that model is not going to get messed up and they still use whatever they built and data is safe, so it hasn't been contaminated with some faulty things that generate pretty much wrong ideas for somebody to go on.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's the question of the day, not just because it's this podcast, but because it's really it's important and interesting. Is you go back to some of those layers I was talking about. If you're training a model, do you have a great data strategy for how you're securing the data going into that model? Really important, because look, you and I know, especially now, a tuned model based on your company's most important information is now a really attractive asset to try to go after, right? Like now I don't even have to go crawl a bunch of databases and SharePoint sites or whatever. I just got to steal the model. Like the model's got everything I need to think, all right. So I got to be really good about how do I secure the data going into it. Once I have the model, how have I done proper uh, authorization, authentication to get access to inference and predictions from the model? How do I think about the security story? You know, how important it is that if you are doing AI apps or AI models or any of that stuff, these should never be one-off deployments. All of those should be on some sort of deployment pipeline. So if an issue is found, you know you can automatically get that thing promoted through the process into production, not a heroic effort on a Sunday. It might be change it upstream in a Git repo, watch changes flow through. There you go. So you got to think about how do I have automation pipelines around my AI systems, my automation. All the infrastructure this is running on should have a great patch management story. So I'm not hosting a valuable asset on something with a 2-year-old Java vulnerability sitting next to it. That's no good. So you're thinking through many of those pieces. Again, even for AI generation, am I using the freebie version of these services where my data is going to be used to train the model? I think most companies are pretty straightforward with that, but that's different than if I'm using, let's say, the enterprise product. So in Google Cloud, for example, when you're using the Gemini in Google Cloud, none of your data is seen by Google. We don't train on it. Of course, for protection reasons, it's your sensitive data. When you're using like Google Search, you know, if I provide something that's my financial information, I have no guarantees that's not going to somehow be used in something. So know what versions my people are using. Understand that, you know, I want to use trusted models because if something was, you know, I use a third-party open source model, maybe it was trained on something that had malicious code in it. Shoot, now it's recommending malicious code to my developers. That's no good. So these are cases where, again, looking at the enterprise version of some of these products sometimes helps because they have the right sort of processes and filters to make sure they filter out anything they shouldn't see. It's got, you know, proper security. For our Gemini users, we have indemnification for legal reasons to make sure they're protected so no one can go make a claim against them later. But looking holistically at this from a security perspective, from access to supply chain security to which versions am I using and what protections do I have, this is a valuable asset in your company treated as such.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, thank you for that, Richard. So one question I'd like to ask before we break or wrap up the show, it's do you have anything in your experience? I know you had a quite distinguished career between different companies, different technologies, and now with Google that you would like to share. Has to be funny, so everyone can walk away from the show smiling. Because talking about security doesn't really put a smile on anyone's face. Everyone gets concerned. So now we need to spice it up a little bit and put the smile on the faces.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think so much of this stuff now, what I'm enjoying as I'm watching this whole industry is how creative this is now allowing people to be, whether it's image generation and things, but even, you know, recently with Gemini, we launched our live API where any of you can go to Google AI Studio. It's free to use and do things like trigger our live API where you can have the AI, let's say, watching your screen and helping you learn to, hey, I'm reading this document. Can you explain this paragraph to me? Okay, thank you. And it keeps going because it can actually take your real-time stream in of your desktop into the chat. That's amazing. Like the things you could do for education, the things that you could do, it's phenomenal. So I think the thing that has me so excited is this is the worst all of this is ever going to be. Like it gets better every day. And the quality of the models, all of these things. So, you know, yes, it's fun to generate pictures of cats wearing cowboy hats and things like that. I enjoy doing that too. But also using this now as an education tool, as something that can help me in my day job as a knowledge worker. As I mentioned, that Gemini deep research thing, you're going to take things that you would spend 3-4 hours researching and get done in 10 minutes. Like literally today, you can do that. That's so cool. Like I think we are all hoping that again, I don't think AI takes your job. I think people who know AI are going to take your job. So get good with these tools. They're fun. They're powerful. Use them for what they're good at. As you say, not everything's going to be transformational. Sometimes it's incremental improvements. But a lot of this stuff makes work fun again. And I think that's the thing that gets me pumped up.
Thank you, Richard, for that. But I think nothing can beat cats in a cowboy hats. So thank you for coming on and sharing your ideas. And definitely, I highly recommend to read your paper. It talks about AI platform and how to build it right and what to get out of it. So it helps a lot. And from your point of view, any parting word for the audience that you would like to leave?
No. Besides, it's not all or nothing here. There's cases where everyone here should be at least looking around, doing research, playing around. There's more free stuff now than ever that you can use. And so that's amazing. But don't feel bad because you've never looked at it. Like, hey, the best time to start is today.
That's right. AI is for everyone, so everyone can jump on it and create something.
That's right.
Once again, thank you, Richard, for coming on. And for everyone else, thank you for joining us and listening and watching.
Thanks for joining us. For more information about these topics or IS Squared, please go to www.issquaredinc.com.